CSS transitions and transforms are very flexible and allow a surprisingly fine degree of control when coordinating multiple page elements and animation timing. In this movie, I'll show you the special techniques you'll need to know when transitioning multiple properties and open up a real designer's playground for you, all with CSS and a little JavaScript. Let's revisit the banner ad we worked on in Chapter 2 and take the animation a step or two further. Let me reload the page to show you where we're at now. I've taken the liberty of animating the gradient rectangle behind the wheels into position, and we still have our spinning logo, but those wheels look like they're begging to move, don't they? And rotate and fade in, all with different timings. Let me show you how to make all that happen. In my code editor, I've got the advert.html file from the Chapter 3 0301 folder open. Now, because I'm going to want to move the wheels into the banner ad area, the first thing I'm going to do is add 1,000 pixels to the left property for each of the wheels to move them off stage right. So let me scroll down to where my wheels are defined. And I have the 3 wheels here. So this is a really easy, quick fix. I'm going to initialize my black wheel here. So instead of the left value being 434 pixels, we'll make it 1,434. And let's do the same bit of quick addition for red wheel, adding 1,000 there. And then also silver wheel, 1,807. So changing those values will set each of the wheels up so that they're off to the right of the advertisement when the page loads. Take a look at the HTML. So you can see the code for each of the 3 wheels starting on line 90, and you'll notice that each of them has a class of wheel. And we're ready now to set up that CSS rule, which will include an initial opacity value as well as transitions for 3 different properties. When you're assigning multiple transitions to the same selector, a special format is required. You'll recall that in the Chapter 1 overview, each of the 4 key declarations, property, duration, timing function, and delay, were defined separately. In most of the movies in Chapter 2, I used the shorthand format for efficiency's sake. Now, however, we're going to write them out separately again with a little bit of a twist. Because of the multiple vendor prefixes, this will result in a fair amount of code, but it's pretty repetitious, as you'll see. So let's scroll up to where I have my wheel class selector defined. And I'll press return so I can start off with my first declaration, and that's going to be to set the opacity to 0. Next, we'll start the transitions, and I'm going to start with the WebKit transition property first. Now, instead of listing just one property here, I'm going to list all 3 properties we're going to change. We're going to change the left value, the opacity, and that last one, the WebKit transform property, will be used to rotate the wheels. All right, so let's enter in left, comma, opacity, comma, WebKit transform. Notice that this time, you don't put a leading dash in front of WebKit. And this becomes the actual name of the property. All right, let's close it off with a semicolon. Now, we need to do the duration. And this will also use the WebKit transition prefix. So, WebKit, transition, and I'll use my code hinting here just to finish out duration. And now, since we have 3 properties, we need 3 different durations. Even if they're all the same value, need to specify each one separated by a comma. So let's make our duration value for the left property 3 seconds, for the opacity 4 seconds, and then for the rotation 3 seconds. Okay, semicolon to close that off. Now let's enter in the timing function. Again, this is going to be vendor-specific prefix. And again, we're going to need 3 values for the 3 properties. So let's make the first 2 ease, and then the third one we'll do ease out. Finally, we're going to put in the delay value. And of course, we need our vendor prefix for this. And as before, we need 3 different values. Now, I'm not going to have any delay for changing the left value, so that comes on immediately. So let's make that 0 seconds. Let's delay the opacity a little bit, however, like 1/2 a second, so 0.5 s. And then finally, for the rotation, we don't want any delay as well, so 0 seconds. Okay, so that is handling just the WebKit version of this. We're going to need to copy all 4 of these declarations and then paste them in for each of the different browsers we want to address, as well as once for the generic version. So let me copy the 4 lines, paste that in. I'm going to put a little space in between it just to make it easy for us to identify. You can use white space judiciously here. And we want to change this first one to the Mozilla prefix, which is MOZ, of course. Now, it's very important to also change the property prefix from WebKit to Mozilla. And the others, we can simply change WebKit to Mozilla without having to modify any of the properties. Okay, so we'll copy that, add a little line, and now we're ready to put in the O for opera, and again change the name of the transform property itself. And finally, let's copy all these values one last time, create one more bit of white space, paste it in, and we want to go generic. So I'll get rid of the vendor prefix both in the property name and also in the property value transform. And then we'll remove the final vendor prefixes here, so everything is pretty cleanly laid out. All right, so that's a lot of code, but we've covered all the browsers we can. Now we need to add the transforms within a new rule with the selector anim-wheel. And I'm going to put that right after the .wheel rule. Enter in my selector .anim-wheel with an open and close curly brace, and put in the WebKit transform property with a rotate function. And for the value, let's enter something that will cause the wheels to roll in a counterclockwise direction. So it's going to be a negative value. And I want them to rotate, let's say, 3 times. So 360 times 3 is 1080. DEG for degrees, semicolon, and that line's done. Now let's copy that line and then paste it 3 times more. And as we've done so many times before, change the vendor prefix. First, changing WebKit to MOZ, and then changing WebKit to .o, and then getting rid of WebKit altogether. So we have one more thing that we want to have happen here in the anim-wheel rule, and that's to bring the opacity up to 1. So that takes care of 2 of the 3 transitions, rotation and opacity. Now let's add in the code for moving the wheels onto the stage to their final position. And to do that, we'll need to add a new rule for each of the wheels that references the anim-wheel class. So I'll put my cursor right after black wheel here, and we'll start off with this one. Put in a # black wheel dot anim-wheel. And that will target the black wheel when the anim-wheel class has been applied. So now all we need to do is to modify the left value and change it to its original value, which is 434 pixels. Okay, so we need to do the same thing for the red and the silver wheels. So I'm going to copy that rule, scroll my page up a little bit, and let's paste the next one right after red wheel and change that black wheel to a red wheel and the value to 618. Paste it in one more time and change black to silver. And finally, change the left value to 807. So we have one last step, and that's to define the triggering JavaScript. Let me scroll back up to the head. We'll use the same technique of swapping in a class when the page has been loaded, and it only takes 1 line of code. So after my second add class function, I'm going to add a third. This time, we're going to target the wheel class. So after your parentheses and your quotes, put in .wheel. And then after the closing parentheses, add another dot and the function add class, open and close parentheses, quotes, and the name of the class we're adding, which is anim-wheel. Let's add that closing semicolon, and we're done. So not too bad, eh? Let's save the page and see what's happening in the browser. Now, let's reload the page and see what happens. Excellent. Well, the timing looks good to my eye, but yours, of course, may differ. Feel free to play with the various transition parameters to find a result you're happy with. If you have the exercise files available, you'll see that I've broken out all the page elements in this advertisement so that any of them can be animated. Have fun!